What is up, guys? My name is Lex. Welcome back to the vlog. Today is a special day. It is November 1st, which is my birthday, turning 29 years old today. And on this episode, we're gonna do things a little bit different. We're gonna go golfing to start out. Never been golfing before. I'm meeting one of my new friends that I met here in Dallas there. Then after that, going over to Texas Card House, gonna play a 2-5 session there. Hopefully we can run good on our birthday, but you guys will have to wait and see. Then after that, we're gonna get some barbecue and go over the session results. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let's go ahead and get started. We end up driving 20 minutes up north to Lewisville, Texas, Lake Park Golf Course. Beautiful views out here overlooking downtown Dallas as well. Then I walk over and meet up with my new friend Matt, a poker player and also a golfer. He was nice enough to let me borrow his extra set of clubs. All right, let's see how this goes.
What the hell?
Turns out golf is pretty exhausting, so I actually didn't play on my birthday, just relaxed the rest of the day. But we are here 3 days later on a Thursday night playing 2-5 no limit, buying in for $4,000 at Texas Card House. Let's get right into the action. It's a $10 straddle pot under the gun. I have Queen 10 of diamonds, beautiful hand. I love playing these suited broadways. I raised to $35 and only the under the gun straddler makes a call. So we're heads up to our first flop here in Texas, which is Queen 10-9, rainbow flopping top two pair. My opponent checks it over to me. I put out a pretty standard c-bet here. I make it 40 bucks. My opponent in the under the gun position looks over at me, looks down at his chips, and decides that $40 is good for him. I actually didn't feel the best about the situation. I kind of felt like he had a monster and he was potentially slow playing. Going to the turn, which is a 7, now bringing a flush draw. He checks it over to me again, and I think I have to continue to bet here with my top two pair. I can't be scared of monsters under the bed. I would probably check back this turn card with all of my one pair hands as well as some of my draws too, just because this card could help his range more than it can help mine. But with top two pair, not going to be checking it back. I bet $125. My opponent looks back at his cards, contemplates his options, looks over at me, looks down at his chips, and decides to raise. He puts in a check raise to $375, and this is a nasty spot against this particular player. He'd been playing very conservative and pretty stunk so far this session, so I immediately put him on a straight. I think he can have all the Jack 8 and King Jack, given the fact that he called out of the straddle, so nasty spot for me. I'm not really sure what to do here. I look back over at his stack. He still has about $1,500 remaining. There's a small percentage of the time that I'm actually ahead here with my top two pair. He could potentially be raising a worse two pair, but most likely this is a set or a straight. I do have some implied odds. If I hit a queen or a 10, I could win a massive pot here in position. I can also represent a flush if a heart hits the river. I don't think he's ever check raising here with a heart flush draw, so I make the call. First 5 minutes of our session, we're playing a pretty big pot here, going to the river, which is the Jack of Spades. We don't improve to a full house, but my opponent checks it over to me, so now I could potentially turn my two pair into a bluff, representing a king or possibly ace-king. My thoughts at the time, if he has a worse two pair that I'm beating, I can't really bet for value because he most likely won't call this river. If he does have an 8 or a king in his hand for a straight, he's not going to be folding if I bet. So I think I'm just burning money here if I turn my hand into a bluff. So I ultimately decide to check back, and he shows us the bad news. Jack 8 offsuit, he flopped a straight. This hand seems like the trend on this trip. I can't make a hand, and when I do make a hand, I'm up against a better one, so not doing the best here the first 2 weeks of our trip, but we do end up switching tables to a better action table and look down at our first premium hand of the night, pocket queens. There's a couple limps, the cutoff makes it 40. I end up re-raising here in the small blind to $150, folds back to the cutoff who decides to make the call. Heads up to the flop in a 3-bet pot, which comes out king high, but with a queen next to it. Flopping middle set, bet doesn't get much better than that, I decide to put in a cagey check, and I'll tell you guys why. Given the fact that we don't block top pair holdings, my opponent can have a lot of top pairs here he can bet. He can have ace king, king queen, king jack, king 9, king 10. All these hands he's going to bet on the flop, and we could potentially check raise to try to build the pot even bigger. If the flop was queen high and we flop top set, I would most likely just bet here, but given the fact that there's an overcard, he can have a lot of value hands here. He will most likely bet, which he does. He puts out a $90 bet. Now we have to decide, should we check call or check raise, and I think there is merit to both options here. If I check call, I can keep all of his bluffs in there and his weaker king X holdings. If he's bluffing, he might give up on the turn and give himself a free river card, which isn't the best for us. If I check raise, it will fold out all of his bluffs, but I can get max value from all of his value hands, so I decide to put in the check raise. I make it $300. Unfortunately, it looks like he was bluffing. He folds pretty quickly, but we do end up taking down this pot, getting a little bit back from that queen 10 hand. There's a raise under the gun to 15, a call, and then the hijack player makes it $75, which I didn't actually see. I thought it was a straddle pot, so I put in the 3-bet, which is actually a 4-bet with ace-queen offsuit on the button. I make it $225, folds all the way back around to the hijack player, who ends up making the call. If I would have known that there was a raise under the gun and the 3-bet, I probably would have just called here on the button with ace-queen, but we decide to 4-bet it and end up going heads up to a 10-high board. We completely miss here, but when my opponent checks to me, I do think I can continue here with a c-bet. I can put all lower pairs into a tough spot and fold out all of his Broadway hands. So I start with a bet here, looking to continue on most streets. I make it $250, and that is going to do the trick. My opponent folds. We end up taking down another pot. Things are about to get pretty interesting. 2 days ago, my friend here in Dallas told me that there was a wild, crazy player who sat down that wanted to flip $3,000 versus another player's $2,000. My friend took the bet and ended up winning. And then today, my friend told me that the same player sat down at his table and offered $3,600 versus his $2,500. My friend won again. So I heard all these crazy things about this crazy action player here in Dallas, and now a guy sits down at seat number 1 at our table, buys in for $5,000 and immediately raises to $200 blind. I look over at my friend at another table and he says, that's him, that's the crazy action player. So I'm like, okay, let's buckle up and get ready. He immediately makes it $200 blind, and we look down at ace jack. My hand should be doing pretty good against a $200 blind bet, so I re-raise to $400, folds all the way back over to the action player, who surprisingly folds. By this time, the word has got out that this action player is at my table. There's 4 or 5 people scrambling to try to get on the transfer list. Another friend comes up to me and says, "You're vlogging this session, right? This guy's crazy. Last night he lost $10,000, so this very well might be the biggest action player at the 2-5 level in Dallas, and he is at our table sitting in seat number 1. Moving on to the next hand, there's a raise to $15 under the gun. The action player in seat number 1 makes a call. We have pocket kings in the small blind. What a beautiful spot. I re-raise here. I make it big. I make it $125, folds all the way back over to the under the gun player, who makes the call, and the action player in seat number 1 makes the call as well. How about a flop of king 8-4? We end up flopping the nuts, the best hand possible. I put out a smaller bet here of $60, and under the gun decides to go with his hand. He shoves all in. Unfortunately, seat number 1 folds, and we make the snap call.
Yep. Okay. Oh, sure. Full house. Yeah, sure.
Deuce of spades on the turn, giving us a sweat, but the 8 on the river gives us a full house. End up taking down this pot. Unfortunately, seat number 1 was not in it, but now our stack has risen up to $4,500. We're hoping to get into a big one here with seat number 1 with about 4 hours left in our session. Let's run it up. Before we move on to the biggest hand of the night, I have a special announcement for you guys. I'm very excited about this, and I want to tell you guys in person. Alright, so I'm editing the video you guys are watching right now, but I have to tell you, my first ever meetup game is coming to Texas in San Antonio at Rounders Card Club. I'm super excited about this. December 1st, 6 p.m., we're going to be playing 1-2 and 1-2-5. I hope to see all you guys there, but let's get back to the table. This next hand is going to be crazy. One of the biggest pots I played here in Texas. Hope you guys are ready for it. Seat number 1, potentially the biggest 2-5 action player in Dallas, makes it $25. A reg next to act makes it $100, and normally I would be folding ace-jack offsuit here, but I want to get into pots with the big action player in position, so I come in with a cold call, folds all the way back around to seat number 1, who makes the call as well. Before this hand started, seat number 1 had been folding a lot, so I asked my friend next to me, is this guy really action? And he said, just wait. Sometimes he folds a lot, then he gets bored and completely explodes and goes crazy and punts off his entire stack, so I'm hoping that's one of these times when we end up flopping top pair in a 3-bet pot 3 ways. Seat number 1 checks, and now the reg puts out a tiny bet of $75. I don't think I have too much of a choice here. I do have the ace of diamonds backdoor nut flush draw. I don't think a raise is good here, so I decide to match his bet. I make a call for $75, and now the action is back on seat number 1, who puts in a raise. He makes it $600. The other player immediately folds, which is good for us, and now the action is back on me. I have about $4,500 in my stack, and seat number 1 covers me. We could be playing a massive pot here. He check raises me to $600, and now I have a decision. Should I call, should I re-raise, or should I fold? Against other players in this room, I would just pitch my ace-jack, but against this particular player, a wild action player, I have heard some crazy things from this guy that he gets bored and just punts off his entire stack, so I don't think I can fold here with my top pair backdoor nut flush draw, so I make the call for $600. The dealer collects the chips and puts them into the middle of over a $1,500 pot, going to the turn, which is the 5 of diamonds, now giving us top pair and the nut flush draw. Seat number 1 decides to go all in. He shoves all in for $5,000. Holy hell, this is a massive overbet here. I look back at my hand, I do have the ace of diamonds, and his hand doesn't really make much sense. If he check raised the flop with a flush draw, would he just go all in here for over 2x pot with a flush? If he had a set or 2 pair on the flop, would he really be shoving this turn card when the flush came in? This is a wild spot. I go deep into the tank. I think back about an hour ago where this particular player in seat number 1 flopped the nut straight on a super wet and connected board. He check called the flop, check called the turn, and then check shoved the river, so he slow played the nuts. So now I'm thinking, if he's fast playing this hand, what is he representing here? It just doesn't really make much sense. I am deep into the tank here, leaning more towards a fold, but then I think back to myself, can I really be folding this hand? I have top pair and the nut flush draw against a crazy wild action player. There's been stories of this guy losing over $10,000, punting off his entire stack. The transfer list for this table is over 10 players long. Everybody wants to play here. I'm in the spot. I've been waiting for this spot all night. Been waiting for a spot like this all trip to get it all in versus a crazy Texas player. So I decide to make the call.
Ready?
Once or twice? What do you got? Nice.
Let me just verify how much you got. Yeah.
Good hand. Nice.
We just lost one of the biggest pots of my life, over $9,000 being shipped to seat number 1. He flopped a set, he raised, and then shoved all in, and he got us to pay him off. This sucks. So far, the first 2 weeks in Dallas have been going terrible so far. I just cannot make a big hand, and when I do, my opponent flops a set and takes me for a massive pot. This is Texas, though. I can match the stack, so I do end up adding on. I buy in for another $8,000. And to make matters even worse, we end up picking up some playable hands throughout the next hour or so and losing every single pot to lose another $300 or $400. I am down over $4,000 on the session. I do convince the entire table to do a mandatory $10 straddle under the gun to try to bump the stakes up. Seat number 1 with all my chips in front of him doesn't really play another hand for the next hour, which just sucks. I now do have a hand in the straddle. The big blind decides to call. I raise it up to $35 with pocket kings. He ends up limp calling my bet, so we're heads up to the flop. The dealer collects our chips and puts them into the middle and puts out a board of 9 king flopping quads. That is what I'm talking about. Time to get some money back. I then look over at the big blind stack, who only has $200 in his stack. Oh my god, how do I run so bad? I'm stuck over $4,000. I make quads and my opponent only has $200. The flop goes check, check, and the turn, my opponent does bet. He makes it $50. With these stack sizes and given the fact that my hand is unbeatable, I just make the call, hoping that he'll continue to bet on the river, which comes off a brick, and unfortunately he checks to me, and with about $150 or so left in his stack, I just put them all in. It's just so tilting to lose a massive pot and now have the seat number 1 player hardly play a hand, and now when I finally make a hand, it's against a short stack. Even if I get called here, it's not even going to put a dent into the amount of money I'm down for the session. He does think for a while, and the big blind decides to put in the call, so we are going to win this one.
God
Oh, yeah.
damn.
Yeah,
Not just a little, a lot. Nice on the floor. Good hand. Thank you.
I'll be back.
3,500 more to go.
Well, making quads on the vlog and getting paid off is pretty cool, but what is not cool is now the seat number 1, the action player, decides that is it for him tonight. He ends up leaving, so there's no real use of staying at this table. The rest of the table is all good regs, so that is it for this session. I end up racking up my chips and heading out for the night. Yep, we are here again, talking to the camera after losing a massive pot. If you guys have been a fan of the vlog or been watching my vlogs for a while, you know that back in August, I lost a $10,500 pot with bottom full house versus top full house against one of the biggest action players in South Florida. That was a cooler, not much I could do there. I'm going to lose $5,000 a lot of the time. That was a 5-10-25 game. Today, I was playing 2-5, and I lost $4,500 with one pair. The biggest punt of my poker career, the biggest money, financial, basically mistake I've ever made in poker, like $4,500 with one pair. Doesn't matter who the player is. I don't think that's ever a good play. I'm really upset with myself about that. I just didn't need to do it. Like, this guy was action. He was raising blind. He was buying in for $5,000. I heard other players talking about him. Oh, he's action. He's a good player. Good for the game. I just don't need to do it. I don't need to call off my whole stack with one pair. I did have the ace of diamonds. His hand didn't make sense, but I don't know. But that has been the trend here in Texas, man, in Dallas. I've been running really bad. Just like, I lost a $6,500 bomb pot last week. Biggest pot I've ever played here in Dallas, I lost. And now $9,000 pot I lost. So I've played 2 big pots while I've been here for 2 weeks, and I've lost both of them. Rough run. Tonight lost over $4,000 on this trip, down heaps. So I'm showing you guys the ups. I'm showing you guys the downs. I'm showing you guys the best. I'm showing you guys the worst. I won $15,000 in Vegas in 2 weeks, and then now I'm down probably $10,000 here. It's pretty nasty. What can you do, though? I guess just learn from your mistakes. Try to get better. Try not to punt again. Try not to call off $4,000 with one pair. It's pretty nasty. Thanks for watching this video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I am going to just take the night off and try to recuperate, try to get back tomorrow. But nasty session, nasty 2 weeks. It should be turning around, though. Hopefully, we'll see. But until next time, I'll see you.